let's move on to group chat, where we discuss the big topic of the week. And this week, we need to talk about Uber, which is one of the most giant trash fires in the world. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
This week, they're dealing with some pretty troubling charges of sexism and workplace harassment.
And it, as the follow-up New York Times expose revealed, not just sexism and harassment, but just general lack of boundaries.
Chaotic
inappropriateness.
Yeah.
There's some general ugliness just in the corporate culture there in general, it seems.
With sexism and misogyny being a big part of it, but not the only part, it turns out.
So why don't we actually start with some of the bigger, broad brush things before we dig down into the sexism, misogyny stuff specifically, which is just like this like weird, hyper aggressive, like, God damn it, Nate. Forgetting to mute your computer. It's all right, I did it too.
Rookie mistake.
This sort of like hyper aggressive, get ahead at any cost culture that they've seemed to have built up, where the only way forward is to take down the person ahead of you and do it in very unapologetically.
I mean, another example of where there are no boundaries at this company.
Yeah.
There are no boundaries between people's jobs and roles, and no boundaries in terms of people's ability to make other people feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that I'd say was part of what Susan Fowler wrote, for sure. Like, it was maybe a secondary part of her story, but the vibe I got from her post was that I'm facing a lot of sexism here, and at the same time, it's a totally chaotic workplace environment where there's no direction. People are just looking out for themselves and stabbing people in the back. And so I just tried to put my head down and do work for a year, did as much as I could, kept running into real issues, and then just decided to get the hell out.
I mean, the New York Times article, which we'll link to in the description for this episode, is very revealing in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
We'll also link to Fowler's letter so you can read that and get some more detail there. But like the Times kind of paints this picture of a company where people are not just out for themselves because it happens to be staffed by a bunch of people who are very self-centered, but that it's like actively encouraged for you to go out of your way to undermine your manager and try to take their job from them. And that's like an understood part of the corporate culture, that like everybody knows their subordinates are out to get them, and that you should be out to get your boss.
And sort of following on to that, and
Both
I think
of you guys look out.
I think both. I think both Fowler's account and the New York Times account sort of agree in this way. There is this. Meritocracy really isn't the right word, but this idea that
Mike Isaac, you use that in the New York
if you're
Times,
high performing enough, then you are immune to consequences. And
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that's what she wrote in her piece. Is basically she reported a manager who was sexually harassing her, and they're like, oh, well, basically he's high performing enough that we want to give him the benefit of the doubt, give him another shot.
Yeah.
This is his first time offense.
And
turns out it's not the first time offense. It took them forever to get him out of the company.
It's fascinating. And I mean, so of the people at this table, Terrence and I do have direct reports. We manage people. We give performance reviews every year. And what we're seeing here from Uber is this idea that your performance as a human being is divorced from your performance in a quantitative results sort of way, which isn't how we see it.
No, I mean, just from like a broader corporate culture thing, like that's an extremely troubling like kind of approach to things. Like it's meritocracy gone completely awry, basically. Like, I mean, meritocracy is the right word. It's just broken down to the point that it seems completely non-functioning. Because, I mean, I personally don't know how Uber works internally. I don't work there. But, like, if the Engadget staff was constantly, like, at each other's throats trying to take each other down and trying to usurp each other and not working together as a cohesive team to, like, accomplish a broader goal, we would fail. We would fall on our place, fall on our face, and it would be terrible.
I think it's reasonable, too, to have to expect people on the one hand to do a good job, but at the same time to have a no asshole policy.
Yeah, I mean, also, let's be clear, I spend probably as much, if not more, of my time working every week than I do all other things combined, except actually probably including sleeping. I want that to be an enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't be a combative place to be. You shouldn't like be constantly watching your back, 50, 60, 70 hours a week because Nate is trying to take your job.
It's true. But I'm going to do it in a nice way.
You'll be polite about it. You'll smile all through it.
Yeah. No, this is, and again, Fowler gets into all these things. She said that, she was told that she would get a bad performance review if she stayed on the team of the person she tried to report. Like, they straight up told her this and then said, if you stay in this team, you can't blame us because we gave you this warning that you would get this bad review. And then she was threatened. They've threatened to fire her for reporting things to HR, basically, which is illegal, she tells them.
When there were enough complaints about this guy, they just kind of
pushed him, moved him someplace else.
Yeah, like
I believe he left the company, but they don't know.
They pulled a Catholic church.
I wasn't going to say it, but
I'm Catholic. It's fine.
It's okay. Yeah,
I believe he did leave.
I can say it.
I believe he did leave the company eventually.
Eventually.
I don't know under what circumstances, if he was fired, if he left of his own accord or what. But yeah, the whole thing is super troubling. And I think the broader, if we get into broader picture, is saying this is not just Uber's problem. Like, maybe they're worse than other companies in the Valley, but Nicole Lee did a good report saying,
Uber is too large. Uber is too large to get away with this idea that it's a startup culture. Not that any startup should have this, but this is a company valued at $70 billion. It is sophisticated enough in other ways that it's sophisticated in the way it deals with the government. Why can't it have a sophisticated HR
It sounds
operation?
like HR was something they just did not prioritize until they were much bigger than it should have happened much sooner in their history, right?
Well, I mean, and again, I think it also goes to that sort of meritocracy run awry thing, which is their ultimate goal is making money, and you are free to do whatever you need to do to reach your goals, whether that's number of drivers, number of rides, amount of money you're bringing in, revenue. All of that stuff takes precedent over the work environment. And so if you do horrible things, if you harass your employees, all of that is forgiven as long as you meet your financial goals.
It's particularly interesting seeing this all come up to this, this over the last week, considering that we just sort of exited a bad month of Uber publicity, right? The Delete Uber campaign was going wild. So they've had a pretty rough 2017 so far.
Yeah. So let's, before we go into the broader issues that Uber has had and the Delete Uber campaign, which I feel like has stopped and started multiple times. I don't know about you guys, but I deleted Uber about a year and a half ago and haven't looked back.
Wow, good for you. It's so convenient sometimes, though.
There's a company called Lyft.
Yeah, I've been using them more now, for sure.
Let's actually dig into some of the specific allegations that have been thrown out against people at Uber, just to take this out of
the realm of abstraction.
Yeah. So this is not from the Fowler letter because that is sort of long and winding and how it's a whole bunch of stuff and be a lot harder to get through on this podcast. So we're just going to go to the New York Times one because it's a little bit more condensed. It says that one Uber manager groped a female coworker's breasts at a company retreat in Las Vegas. This was reported to have happened publicly and in plain view of people, and nothing happened.
That sounds like one of the few cases, at least cited so far, where someone was quickly and summarily terminated.
Yeah.
As you'd hope.
Yes. There was an incident in a meeting where a director shouted a homophobic slur at a subordinate during a heated confrontation. There was another incident where a manager threatened to beat an underperforming employee's head in with a baseball bat. Now, to be fair, we have to say, we don't have documentary evidence of these things. These are allegations. These are, at least to some extent, unproven. But, I mean, it paints a really horrifying picture, and those are just, a few incidents. And
I believe Mike Isaac, the New York Times reporter, said at the beginning of his story that he spoke to 30 or maybe more than 30 current and former employees.
Yep.
Yeah. Which is a pretty good sample.
Right. I was impressed by his sourcing.
Yeah. And I think this all comes top down. Another thing he notes in his story is that Uber CEO, GQ article of 2014, he refers to Uber as Boober because of how the company helped him attract women.
Fuck that guy.
Seriously.
I mean, don't fuck that guy, but
Yeah, actually,
fuck that guy.
nobody should ever fuck that guy ever again. Like,
So this has been going on for, I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of talk about how he's a horrible human being for a long time.
yeah.
It just doesn't seem to matter up to a certain point.
So let's do a quick sort of run through the other stuff that Uber has gotten in trouble for over the last God knows how many years. They got a little blowback last month for dropping surge pricing when New York City taxis went on strike in protest of Trump's immigration ban.
They were called strike breakers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was the incident where they were sort of using their power to track journalists, right? Or threatening to?
Threatening to. I don't have the guy's name in front of me, unfortunately. One of the higher-ups at Uber basically suggested that they should use Uber systems
The
to
God
track...
view. The God view.
Yeah, the God
tool.
view, which kind of tracks and monitors Uber traffic all over to keep tabs on journalists who wrote disparaging articles about Uber.
And this was back in 2014.
Yeah.
By the way. So it's a long time ago now.
This has been years
And
and years of bad press.
Then
for this
just
company.
it's negotiating tactics with various cities and local governments.
Well, their tactic is don't negotiate, basically.
Just keep doing what they're doing.
Roll in.
Do your thing
your
until they
thing.
get legally
In
challenged.
certain places like Paris, weren't they accused of actually funding any, paying for any fines incurred by its drivers?
That I'm not 100% sure of, but I'm sure I can find out very quickly.
The list
we
goes
have
on
the-
and on.
We have the internet in the room with us. Yeah, I mean, so they've found themselves on the wrong side of the law on multiple occasions. They've been accused of being strike breakers. There's been incidents across the globe, which, I mean, this falls... That they happened falls less, I think, on Uber, but how they handled it, which was botched, which was, a number of sexual assaults by drivers and their employee, which they handled atrociously.
They were also very resistant to release any sort of diversity reporting, which isn't in the same realm of these other transgressions, but it's just interesting to see their lack of regard for
They will
openness
now,
around this.
but-
They will now. They've
Well, I was gonna say that-
changed positions, but
That brings us to their reaction to this letter, which Fowler released, which, I don't know how much faith I want to put in the response that it's like genuine or that it's going to get anything accomplished, but it does seem like they're going a step farther than they have in the past in
feels
trying
like
to
the
address
first
their
time
issues.
that they're taking it seriously.
It feels like it might be.
And it sounds like it's kind of coming to a head internally. It sounds like lots of employees are now internally coming forward and saying, I'm having these experiences, or I'm horrified to hear these experiences. Like, people are starting to open up and talk about this more. Like, it seems like the Fowler letter was finally the thing that like tipped the scales.
So what are the things they're doing in response to this?
So they're conducting an investigation led by Eric Holder.
Yes.
You may have heard of him.
Former Attorney General of the United States.
Yes. Also participating is board member Ariana Huffington. You may have heard of her also.
Former editor-in-chief of Huffington Post.
Based in this building.
Our former boss, actually.
Yeah. So there's the investigation. They'll be releasing diversity numbers going forward. And Uber itself led a 90-minute town hall meeting with its own employees recently just to answer questions, hear grievances. Apparently that was very fraught,
Yes.
as you'd expect it to be.
I would love to kind of see that. Apparently there is video of that exists somewhere.
Right. The New York Times had a chance to review it.
I mean, if anybody out there wants to send that our way, please feel free.
Yeah.
But yeah, it sounds like it got pretty heated. It sounds like it got pretty emotional, by all intents and purposes. I don't know if I believe this, but I did see one report that Travis Kalanick.
Butchering yet another name.
That's what I do.
I don't know how to say it either.
Uber CEO at some point was actually brought to tears during the course of this because of God knows
the horrible things people were saying that were happening at his company.
Yeah.
So he's not a robot.
Yeah, maybe
Perhaps.
he's not a complete monster. So I mean, I don't know. It's gonna be a rough year for Uber, I think. But is it too late? Is kind of my question at this point.
To change the culture there?
To change the culture there and to regain trust amongst a certain sect of the population. I mean, Uber is too big, I think, obviously, to fail at this point. Like, they're not
That was going to be my next question. Are they too big to fail?
I think they are. They're not going away, right?
Right.
I mean, there's no way this destroys Uber as a company.
No. Hopefully it'll change things for the better. I'm a naive, sort of optimistic person. I don't know if it'll actually happen, but I guess that's the best case scenario when horrible things like this happen, is that you can say, well, hopefully it'll get better for all those people working there, because they do employ quite a large number of people. And then I think that the other good thing that could come of this is that hopefully it will encourage other companies in Silicon Valley to look at how they're dealing with employees, dealing with women, dealing with minorities, that sort of thing. It's been a hot topic, obviously. But like, as I think we reported, we're saying this is not unique to Uber, as we've said multiple times.
Yeah.
Silicon Valley in general seems to be a pretty sexist place. Then that just needs to change. And I think there's two issues. One is, like, we've talked a lot about diversity at these companies, filling in their ranks with women and people of color and so forth. And then the other side is how they treat those people while they're there. Fowler writes that she just saw the numbers dropping of women working there. Well, like, she was there for a year and she just saw it go from like 15% to like 3% of her team or something crazy like that.
I mean, and that's like an important point, I think, that we can't repeat enough. It's not enough to hire, 40% of your staff be female engineers or whatever. Like, they also need to be happy and comfortable working there. They have to have a welcoming, safe environment.
And you need to respond to their concerns if something goes wrong, which clearly it sounds like Uber was not. And that's one of the worst things about it, too, is not just the people there who were treating their employees badly, but then the corporate response, which was so dismissive and just bizarre.
So before we kind of wrap up this conversation, because I think we don't have the time, really, I think, to disappear down the rabbit hole of sexism in Silicon Valley is a broader thing right now. That is, like, we could fill
weeks of podcasts,
years of podcasts probably about it. But I think one response from Uber in this that kind of gave me pause. Like, I know it seems like they're kind of starting to take things seriously a little bit, and hopefully they are. Hopefully this was like a last gasp of, like, stupid Uber, which was in the midst of all this, they came out and said, we're at I think it said 15% female of our engineers, product managers, and whatever else are female, and then went on to say Google's at 16 and Twitter's at 10, like,
which is incorrect.
Basically, well, the number they give for Twitter, A, is incorrect, but B, also other companies' shortcomings don't excuse yours.
Right.
I hate whenever I see that from, it's the sort of thing you see from, like, politicians and stuff often. It's like I was wrong, but so are you.
Right. And I mean,
you're still wrong.
Without going down another rabbit hole.
Yeah, we'll stop there. It's
and I say this is myself as a woman. Obviously, I would like to see strong representation at these companies, but I think that's only the beginning. Obviously, as we've said, it's the way they treat their employees. And then I think outwardly, image is a whole other thing. I mean, we're talking about this on the same day that Apple came out in defense of transgender rights.
Yep.
And, a couple weeks ago, there was a Super Bowl where any number of tech companies, I don't think Uber was included among them, released ads that had some sort of social message. And by the way, one of them was Airbnb, which is similar to Uber in the sense that it has also had to negotiate with a lot of local governments as it introduces what is a pretty disruptive product.
Yeah.
But in some ways, Airbnb and Uber are couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
I can't speak to their Airbnb's internal culture. I don't think it has been plagued by controversy the way Uber has.
I mean, it's had occasional moments of issue, but not anything in the same.
They've handled it much better.
And, Airbnb, I think, is better at negotiating. I think Airbnb has come under fire for racism among people renting out their apartments, but Airbnb seems to have been fairly quick to take a stand and make a commitment to fighting that. I don't even want to get into Airbnb's Super Bowl ad because that seems like beside the point. But I think there is a blueprint out there for companies that are big companies and profitable, that are doing a better job treating their employees better and also just projecting a better image.
Yeah.
Well, as far as Airbnb goes, I was at one of their events in San Francisco last year where their new head of diversity, I believe, talked about the racism issues and went through all the steps that they were going to take to address them. And that made me think of another article, Terrence, that you shared was on Recode about Bernard Coleman, who's Uber's new diversity officer. I believe he joined the company about a month ago, so right before all this stuff started happening. So he's going to have a tough first couple months too, but at least they have someone in this position. Hopefully he will be able to make a difference. It sounds like he's got the background to do so.
Yeah, and I mean, these companies aren't perfect either, but I think we can, and that's just one example, but I think there are companies that are doing more to work on these things.
Yeah. And when criticism comes their way, their reaction isn't as dismissive. And I think that's one of the big things. It's ultimately not like a really concrete thing to get obsessed about. Like, I know that how Uber reacts to criticism about sexual harassment isn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Like, it's more important that you actually address the root of the problem. But it sets a tone when your reaction to criticism and accusations of sexual harassment is, yeah, but so does Google. Like, it's, say, we'll look into that. You're right, that's a very serious accusation. There are potential problems here, and we will do our best to address it.
Yeah. And by the way, Google's women, however few they are, they get free lunch, and they get their own bathrooms, and probably aren't groped at events.
They also probably get the leather jackets.
Yeah.
There's so many tiny little details that we don't have time to get to that you all should read the letter, read the New York Times article, also read our articles. Nicole has an excellent piece about how Uber is really not alone, that it's just emblematic of a broader problem in Silicon Valley with sexism. All very much worth a read. All of those links will be down in the description. Last week, we ended with our recommendation section. We are still looking for a name for that. Right now, we got a couple of suggestions. We haven't settled on one just yet. I'm going to go with a slight variation on one of the suggestions we received, which is the wind down, which I kind of like. So this is where we kind of just talk about what we're reading, watching, listening to, just what we're doing in our downtime to take our mind off of the nonsense that's going around, or helping us connect better with the nonsense going on in our world. You know, news-based
understanding the nonsense is important.
Yeah, understanding the nonsense is important. So why don't we start with you, Dana? What are you doing in your downtime?
Okay, so I haven't had time to listen to a new album or read a new book this week. But I am, one of my goals for 2017, I am trying to cook or bake a new recipe each week.
Nice.
So for this weekend, I have my eye on these salted tahini chocolate chip cookies I read about in the New York Times. So I'm going to try that recipe this weekend. If they work out well, I'll bring some into the office for you guys. Work mom here.
I'll be back on Tuesday.
And but readers too, if there are any bakers and cooks out there who are enthusiastic about such things and want to send some easy recipes to a novice like me, you should do that.
Do you have a preference for baking over cooking yet? Because I feel like they're very different in terms of skill sets, right? Cooking is a little more improvisational. You can have a little more freedom. Baking's like a more scientific process.
Even my non-desserty recipes are more often cooked in the oven. So I guess I'm more comfortable baking, but I also want to get good at stovetop cooking too.
So really your recommendation is not so much a recommendation as asking for recommendations.
Yeah, why not?
That works.
Well,
send Dana your recommendations.
Send me your recipes.
Yeah.
Next week we'll see if the cookies are worth recommending.
Yeah.
I've been sending Dana recipes every so often.
But yeah, if readers have any easy, delicious recipes for me to try, please do send them my way.
I mean, I think we could say Dana is endorsing cooking for yourself.
Yeah. But more, she wants recommendations.
And if I like what you give me, I'll shout it out on the podcast.
There you Nate?
So this year I've been trying to read more books, both fiction and nonfiction. And currently I am reading My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry by Frederick Backman. If you know him, you might know him from a book called A Man Called Ove, which is very popular right now. Big New York Times bestseller. I believe he's Swedish and his books are translated. The translations are excellent. But anyway, Ove is a great read. I'm reading another one of his books, My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry. And it's a great fiction book. It's not fantasy. It's about a 7-year-old girl and her relationship with her grandmother that dovetails into these really fantastical sort of imagined worlds. It's just like it plays off of the strength of the imagination that children have to take their real world and turn it into something that's this epic adventure. Even though we're not hunting orcs or whatever in the book, but it's just a great, really powerful read. Great characters, everything about everything I've read by this author has been excellent. So go check it out.
Cool. I'm going to recommend that everybody check out the new album from Moon Duo. It's called Occult Architecture Volume 1. It's sort of like psychedelic. I'm going to use this word, and I hate that I'm going to use it because this is what they call the genre of music, but it's krautrock. Nothing like genres of music based on racial slurs. Mm-hmm. But it's like really like sort of robotic, motoric rhythms and synthesizers and like super fuzzy guitar. If you were into the first Queens of the Stone Age album, their self-titled album, you'll probably like this. It's a little noisier than say like a New or a Can. Obviously, it's a little bit more
noisier
poppy.
than Can.
Well, I mean, Can's kind of like lots of like other instruments, not so much big distorted guitar riffs. So this is more that realm. It's super good. It's like super driving. If you were to try and recreate Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, this would be an excellent soundtrack to it. It's just as appropriate for driving down desert highways as it is for taking lots of drugs too.
I listened to the first 10 seconds before the podcast started, and it sounded pretty good.
Yeah. So yeah, you should all check that out. I just want to thank Alex Strong for sending us the title for the wind down. You can find him on Twitter. It's at Invincible Alex. I want to make sure I got that right. It's not invisible. It's Invincible Alex. So he sent us that recommendation. Thank you, Alex. And other people, please send us recommendations for the closing segment of the show. We'll figure out what we want to call it.
I think what Terrence is saying is that he will rearrange every aspect of the podcast based on your whims.
Yeah. Well, as I say every week, we want your suggestions, we want your feedback, we want your recommendations, questions, comments, concerns. If you literally just want to yell nonsense at us, that's fine too. I might not read it. I might just delete it, but send it our way. You can hit us up. It's at Engadget Podcast on Twitter. You can email us, podcast@Engadget. Dana, where can the fine people find you?
I am at Dana Wollman on Twitter, and again, send me your recipes.
Yes. Nate, where can the fine people find you?
I am at Nate Ingraham on Twitter, and send me your recipes as well. Or book recommendations.
Yeah.
I am at Terrence O'Brien. You can send me recipes. I like cooking and stuff, so do that. But please make sure to tune in next week. Rate us on iTunes, subscribe in your podcast app of choice. All of that stuff helps other people find the show, and we want people to watch the show. Generally, that's considered a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Most of the time.
All right, let's go get back to work.
All right. Later, guys.